Hey there, this is part 2 of a 2-part conversation on sex and sexuality and how to broach the topic with our kids. I'm with my guest, Pastor Curtis, who's been sharing with us his own struggles, how he came to learn of sex, and the things he's seen throughout his journey as an educator, a teacher. And if you haven't seen part 1 of this conversation, you're definitely gonna want to go back to that even as we continue. So Pasi, we left off with you telling us how you and your wife Nash have initiated this conversation with your kids and how that has opened the door, and now your kids can come to you. And I want you to tell us or share with us some of the questions, some of the things they brought up with you guys in regards to sex.
Okay. They tell us when they like someone, like when they like someone of the opposite sex, and what they should do about that. Some of their friends have girlfriends, boyfriends. Some of their friends kiss each other and fondle each other. They tell us all these stories about what's happening out there.
Right.
And, they go to a Christian school. So as soon as you think you're actually insulated from these things, we find out through our own children that in actuality they're not.
Right.
They're exposed to things on TV with social media. Well, not my children are on social media, but they do have access to the internet on occasion, and they see all kinds of things that way. And so periodically, they listen to music and they hear certain things, even though we try to keep all of our music Christian-based. That's not always possible. We're not with our children 24/7. And so they'll ask us questions about what certain things mean, and to the best of our ability, and again, according to our children's age, we try to answer their questions precisely, frankly, but also honestly.
Right. 2 things you've touched on that I'd like us to explore a bit more. Number 1, your kids are in a Christian school. I think that there's parents who would think that putting your kids in such an environment, you're insulating them and creating an insular experience for them where they don't get to hear about sex the way other kids do get to. Where's the lie in that?
Well, the truth is, we're all sexual beings.
Wherever we are.
Yeah.
Christian school, public school.
Yeah. I mean, is there Christian sex and non-Christian sexuality? I mean, we're all sexuality. We all have to deal with this passion that God has put within us. And so what we hope, of course, is that as Christians, we receive tools and skills and strategies and perspective to steward our sexuality in healthy ways and in ways that glorify God. But that's not always the case. And in any institution, you'll have certain people, certain families, certain parents who don't necessarily line up with all your values. So even though it's a Christian school, that doesn't mean that everyone in the school views sexuality in precisely the same ways. And if they do view it in the same way, that doesn't mean their behavior lines up with their values.
Right. So let's just dispel that myth real quick. You can't hide your children away.
That's right.
The world is a very sexually charged place.
That's right.
No matter where you take them to school, they're going to learn about it.
That's right.
So you're best served to lay the right foundation. I think that's part of my message, what I want to get out there. And the second thing is, because you and Nash have opened the door, now your kids are comfortable coming to you. What's your reaction when Mumu or Zube comes and tells you, hey, I like this person, or the kids in my class are doing this? And, if they're noticing it sparked some kind of interest in them. How do you take the news? How do you steward that conversation when it comes up?
Yeah. We try to stay honest. We try not to look spooked or panicked.
Right.
That this is part of what it means to grow up. That these challenges that you may be experiencing are, in the larger sense, opportunities to learn and to grow. And so we just try to keep that dialogue fresh and open.
Right. And do you bear your own scars, maybe? How much of yourself do you give to your children as far as sex and sexuality?
Yeah.
How much of yourself are you willing to allow them to learn from?
Yeah. That's a tricky one. First of all, no, even us as adults, we don't necessarily like to think of our parents having sex. I mean, that's not that's not a pleasant imagination. Imagery. So we don't talk about those kinds of intimate details, but I do tell my children about mistakes that I've made in the past, especially before I got married. I think I've told my daughter about the condom story, my first talk from my parents about sex.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll do this, to be honest, when I'm going on a date. So I like to take my daughter on dates.
Right.
And I'll take my sons on dates as well. I really want them to know how they ought to be treated. So that when they're not treated, or if they're not treated in such a manner, they'll know. They'll have something to compare their experience to. And during our date, I'll ask my daughter, how are you doing? But I'll also ask her, what brings you pleasure?
Right.
Yeah, is it gardening? Is it putting your hands in the soil? Is it touching the texture of people's hair and you making people's hair, or or the keys of a piano, because she likes to dabble in piano. What brings you pleasure? I think children really need to know that. They need to be able to know the things that bring them pleasure at the body level, and they need to be touched often, healthy touch, so that when it's another kind of touch, they can differentiate between those two. But they also need to know what turns them on, so to speak, psychologically, mentally, spiritually. What Bible stories, do it for you. And that one is easy, because my son, that David and Goliath, we can tell him he's 8, 9 now. We can tell him that story every single night. It never gets old for him.
Wow. It's a beautiful story. And I guess it resonates with boys,
Yeah.
Small boy, stone, sling, big giant,
And he's he's small for his age, so it resonates with him.
Right. And there's something that you've mentioned that I absolutely love, and that's the dates you do with your daughter and your sons. And it sounds to me like you're being proactive about modeling what healthy masculinity ought to look like. And sex talk starts with our femininity and masculinity coming together. And I would imagine that healthy sexuality looks like those two coexisting and flowing as they ought to. And the opposite is also true. Unhealthy sexuality is them clashing, which is what we see a lot of in our culture.
Correct.
And what we're trying to remedy one conversation at a time, and you spoke about something else, which is finding out what turns them on, even intellectually, spiritually, on a soulic level. And I think it's absolutely beautiful that you should teach your children, as you say you're doing, about the vastness of their being, right? To concentrate only on sex, as culture is trying to teach us to do, is to rob you of so much more.
That's right.
Because you're so vast as a person. there's so many elements of you that need exploration and growth, and you've taught me that a lot throughout the years in the conversations we've had. And I want you to share with people from your heart why you came, why you took my invitation, what sex and sexuality means to you as a person, and how best you can encourage any parent who wants to do it. Yeah.
Okay. You said a mouthful there.
I did.
You're preaching, sister. I accepted your invitation for several reasons. Number one, because you and I are friends, and we have been friends for many years. Number two, I've seen the embryonic stage of this project that you began when it was just an idea in your head, and to see it manifest into something visible, or even these series of podcasts. I'm extremely happy about that, and I'm also extremely proud of you. And one of the reasons I'm happy is because these topics that you're raising for parents to engage their children in are crucial topics. We're not going to experience freedom. We're not going to be liberated in our desires or in our spirituality, in our relationships, including our relationship with our Creator, unless we deal with these issues, unless we deal with sexuality. So to see you pushing the envelope and raising awareness, bringing consciousness into these conversations when silence has been one of our primary languages. I heard a Kenyan say that, the major languages in Kenya is English and Swahili and silence.
Wow.
And that has to change. We're not going to silence our way into freedom. It's just not going to work. So we'll have to become more verbal lovers, more verbal parents, and prayerfully that will make more verbal children who can communicate the things that are actually going on in their bodies as they become aware of it.
Right. And the title of this particular story in my book is Private but Not Secret. You mentioned about, not giving them all the information because you ought not to. How do you distinguish between privacy, which is something that we all need? We all need privacy to a certain degree, and the kind of secrecy where, where people can take advantage of them. How do you make that distinction for your kids in your household?
We tell them again that, there are parts of your body that other people should not have access to.
And why? Have you gotten to the why of it?
Well, there are different reasons why. And this is where the spirituality and sexuality, I think, comes into play. And because we are committed to Christ and the teachings of Christ, we teach our children that our bodies are sacred, that they are temples, temples of the Holy Spirit. And some places are actually even more sacred than other places. For example, our children know that their parents' bedroom, my wife and I's bedroom, that's a special place for us.
Come on. It sounds about right.
Yeah.
As it ought to be.
That's right. And you can come to my house, Charlotte. I love you, but you're not coming into the bedroom. That's just not that's not your place. So even though everyone has a bedroom, generally speaking, we have places where we sleep. That everyone should not have access to that.
Everything.
That's
right. That's beautiful. I love that. And even from a very early age, I know if this is the kind of conversations you're having, their consciousness of, what's a healthy boundary in regards to their bodies, their sexuality is already being formed, and that will inform their decision making as they grow older, right? And Another thing that Anne and I deliberately put in the book is a scenario where one child is introducing another child to sex. And I wanted parents to know that, yeah, we have this idea of what sexual predators look like, but there's also this other aspect where children sexualize others a lot. Sure. And this is something I heard from teachers when I was doing research for my work. What do you think about that? You actually mentioned when we started the conversation that you yourself used to write some pornographic stuff and distribute it. What do you think about the whole one child sexualizing another?
Well, yeah, even our children, they have been approached by other children to do certain sexual deeds, stuff that my children didn't know about, but got exposed to through other children and learned different terms and different behaviors and actions. What we try to do with our children, because the truth is, the children that God has entrusted to me, that actually all children are God's children. So even when we see children who are doing things that don't necessarily line up with our values, we want to see why they are doing it. Right. What is their story? Because we all have a story. And so we don't want to criminalize children for doing things that in all probability they learn from someone else, an adult, or learn from a movie or some other form of media. So what we try to do is get to the bottom of it. Maybe talk to the parent, sometimes inform a teacher. We've had to do both of those things, by the way, in our children's short lives. And they've been favorable. The outcome has been favorable. In one case, the parent did not know that their child was actually engaging in this kind of behavior. And when she talked to her child about it, she learned where he learned about it, and she was able to address the situation in that way.
Right. There's this saying that goes something like, victims make other victims.
That's right.
So even the child who's sexualizing another child could very easily be a victim. It's, I think, almost 100% of the time, they're reenacting something that somebody has done to them.
Correct.
And I think we need to be responsible. We need to care about not just our own children, but each other's children. And take a step when your child comes to you and they give you information that they picked up from elsewhere. That I've handled in the book, and I want parents to also see what it means to have laid the foundation. A child who's going out there, having addressed some of these things with their parents, is way more protected than the one who's out there blank, because everybody gets to put their signature all over their minds. And do you have any stance on dressing and how your kids can and should dress? And is there a place where these things intersect? Like, how do you express yourself as a young girl, as a young man, and how do those things come together?
Yeah, Charlotte. I mean, it's such a good question. I don't think there's a standard that every single parent has to follow with this. And again, our children have different personalities. I haven't had a major issue with this. I thank God for that. My wife dressed real modestly. And so I think my daughter just kind of follows after her. I don't know if she follows after her in personality or just in just her behavior. I'm not sure. And my sons are the same way. They kind of dress like me, and I'm not, I'm not that dude. I will say this, my daughter especially, my daughter is 12, but she developed early. She grew breasts when she was 10, and I think she also got on her period at 10 as well. I think that might be a little premature. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the average is now. It seems like it's getting younger and younger, though.
She told you about it?
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh, right.
Well, the good thing was my wife and my daughter will have these conversations so that when her periods came, it didn't shock her.
Right.
She already understood what that means and what happens, what the physical ramifications of that are, and so forth. So I do have to tell my daughter, though, that not everyone will see you the way I see you. Not everyone will see you as an innocent child. That once you start developing and your femininity begins to be expressed through your body, there are people out here who will try to take advantage of you. And that's why we're laying this foundation for you. We need you to be aware of that. And we don't want you to be scared and paranoid and anxious, but we do want you to be alert.
Right. And a lot like your daughter, I was an early maturer myself. I developed pretty early, and I can tell you firsthand, there's a kind of attention you start getting, and you wanna have your child prepared when they're in that position. The attention of men can't just come and destabilize them, which is what happens if you haven't been consciously laying that foundation. And Curtis, I just want to thank you so much for making the time to come and have this conversation with me today. I feel like there's so much more to say. We have so little time, but I'm hoping that even what we've done here, people are going to find useful. I'm hoping it's going to open avenues of communication in our homes, between adults, couples, between parents and their kids. And I hope people will be helped. You know, I hope we are going to create an environment where we prioritize protecting our children in this way. And I want you to wrap this up. I want you to address the people who are watching us, parents who mean well, parents who want to protect their children, believers, non-believers even, because the goal is the same, to keep our kids safe from any kind of predatory behavior, from any kind of information that would harm them. So go for it.
First of all, let me just say that there is no such thing as perfect parenthood. There are no perfect parents. You may make mistakes. I know I have, and I assume I'm going to continue to do so. I don't want to, but we're human beings. And so I don't want you to feel like, oh, I have to get everything right. I have to cross every T. I have to dot every I. I think we need to save room for the grace of God. David had horrible leadership in Saul. For those of you who are Christians and you know these Old Testament stories and Old Testament Israeli history, he had horrible leadership through Saul, but actually was an excellent king. The children of Israel going through the wilderness had excellent leadership in Moses, and yet most of them, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, didn't make it into the promised land. So it's not just about us as parents. We have to save room for the grace of God and trust Him to lead our children in ways that glorify Him and that lead ultimately to their fulfillment in the earth. And so I want you to be encouraged in that way. Whatever mistakes we have made in the past, God is sovereign, and He knows somehow even to use our mistakes in a way that ultimately works for good. That's a mystery. I can't explain that, but I know it's true. And so you can relax. I think what children really appreciate from parents are when we're able to relax and simply to be our true selves. And so please keep going. Keep going in your sacred responsibility to care for and to instruct and to raise and to counsel your own children.
That's everything from us today. You've heard it from Curtis. He's a father, an educator, a pastor, a man of God. Obviously, he carries this testimony with him everywhere he goes. I hope you find these talks helpful. I hope you interact with us on our different social media platforms. We are going to make all that information available to you as we go along. And I hope you pick up a copy of my book, enjoy reading it, and interact with us more on what you learn, the questions that pop up with you and your kids. And stay blessed. Thank you. This conversation was recorded at Northcourt Apartments along Agwins-Cortec Road. They have fantastic 3-bedroom apartments with servants' quarters, and you definitely want to come check them out when you get the chance.